Hi, my name's Pete Fairley, and welcome to a special audio blog of For Pete's Sake. You can read my blog on ProFootballHof.com every Thursday, but today, very pleased to debut an audio blog, and with me, a legend here in Canton, because he has a bronze bust right here. He's one of 267 individuals with a bronze bust in our Hall of Fame gallery from the class of 2001, legendary defensive end Jack Youngblood. Welcome, Jack. I would be remiss if I did not begin our conversation today talking about your new book. It's fresh out in bookstores. Our fans can also buy it on our online store at ProFootballHof.com. It's titled Because It Was Sunday, The Legend of Jack Youngblood. Jack, tell me a little bit about how this book came about being.
Well, it started back in June, July of last year. The thought came to do a new book. Because we were thinking that to gain some exposure, if you're going to run for office, you need some exposure, and it'd be a good thing to lay down some of the principles of your life through the story of your life, and show people who you are and what and where you've come from. See what kind of guy you are, what kind of man you are. And it started out. Dave Cooper is the writer. He was the PR director for the Arena League when I was involved in that, and we reconnected and started working on it. Put out an outline, and then just day in and day out we'd go over stories, and we'd go over another facet of the career, and it was really a lot of fun to bring back some of those great memories. I mean, it has been an unbelievable journey. It really has.
Now, Jack, you said you're going to run for office. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I was considering it. I was really considering it, because our country is in a real bad state of affairs right now, and I wanted to go and see if that was something that I could go and represent my constituents in North Florida. I believe I know them. I've lived with them. I'm of their heart. I felt that our representative there had not lived up to that, and I wanted to see if I could do that. To get elected and go up there and do what's right for this country.
Now, Jack, I met you the first time back in 2001 when you were enshrined, and because you're a great supporter of the Hall of Fame, we get to see you at least once a year and sometimes more. And I recall one statement that you told me once was that if you got $1 for every time somebody asked you about playing with a broken leg, you'd be a rich man. So there's $1 I owe you, and I'm going to owe you a couple more dollars before this interview's over. But you want to talk about toughness. That defines who you are, and what caught me as I look at the cover of your new book, again titled Because It Was Sunday, The Legend of Jack Youngblood, it was a quote from Hall of Fame coach John Madden, and as a football historian, as a football fan, I don't think there could be a better quote about you, but the quote says, "If a Martian landed in my backyard, knocked on my door, and asked me, 'What's a football player?' I'd go get Jack Youngblood."
Isn't that just John Madden? I mean, that's a madness.
Well, it says a lot about Jack Youngblood as well, and I think what was fascinating about your new book is it's obviously a life story, and as visitors walk through the Hall of Fame here in Canton, they certainly know a lot about your career with the Rams from 1971 to 1984 that ultimately earned you a bronze bust, but a very intriguing book. It puts a lot into defining the character of who you are, and obviously your childhood was the foundation for not only what you did on the football field, but away from the football field, and there was a story early in the book that really caught my attention. Is as a young boy, you wake up on your 10th birthday, and you're getting ready for school on what would normally be a very special day for any 10-year-old, when you find out that your father had passed away the night before. And I can only imagine what the impact is, but I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. And it describes, "And through the tears of a child came the strength of a young man who put the needs of his family first." And then later it shares what your mom told you, and she said, "You're going to hunker down and plow through, and you're going to get out of bed and go to school every day." And if I could ever see a more telling trait that leads to a man playing 201 consecutive games in the NFL, clearly that was a very early childhood memory or childhood event that impacted your life.
Yeah, that's one of those experiences that molds you. We're still in the developmental phases of our life when we're 10 years old, and I had watched my father, raise his family and be my father, my dad, my bread maker, breadwinner, and both mom and dad. But then, and my grandfather too, his father was sheriff of Nassau County, and I had instinctively picked up that the male of your family was the breadwinner. Now, when it sunk in that my father had died, I mean, my first thought was, well, that means I've got to go to work. I've got to go, prepare and provide for my mother and my two sisters. And that was what was, the innate DNA that's part of me.
And clearly your mother, a great role model for you, but you also mentioned your grandfather and how he kind of took over for your father. Talk about what values he instilled in you.
Well, when you talk about Herbert Jackson Youngblood, he was the first. I'm the third. He was sheriff of Nassau County, and he was, in my opinion, he was and a lot of people's opinion in those days, he was the Buford Pusser of North Florida. He ran that county with an iron hand, and he was your lawman. He wasn't a politician. He was your peace officer. He was going to hold the peace for that county.
Safe to say,
and the high sheriff.
Jack, would it be safe to say that Florida, in that northern Florida in 1960, was a little different than what we see today?
It's a little bit different. Yeah, it's changed over the years. I mean, he was sheriff for 28 years, so he was in there in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So the whole complex of Florida has changed from those days. I don't know if he could still be the sheriff today, but I believe he could because he being the high sheriff in America, you are the epitome of law enforcement for your county. I mean, you have more power really than the federal government has, especially from a state's perspective. And so I watched him and saw how he conducted himself and how he carried himself. And he was constantly reminding me that, okay, at 8 and 9 years old, I give you a job to do. You go do that job to the best of your ability and finish it. You don't do half the job, and you don't do it halfway. You go do it to the best of your ability. And if it's raking leaves, you're going to rake the leaves to the best. You're not going to leave a leaf down there. You're going to get it all done. And that's one of those fundamentals that just kind of it sticks. It's just there. That's just part of who I am.
This is a special edition of For Pete's Sake blog, and we are speaking with Jack Youngblood from the Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2001, talking, among other things, Jack's new book, Because It Was Sunday, The Legend of Jack Youngblood. It's out in bookstores now, written by D.W. Cooper. It's a great read if you want to find out about what makes this guy tick. And Jack Youngblood, what a career. We're going to talk a lot more about that in a little bit. And as we mentioned earlier, every time I ask you about playing on a broken leg, I owe you $1. So I'm going to keep saying that so we can make you some money in today's audio blog. But
there you go.
You won 3 state titles in high school. You went on to Florida, Gator for life, as you describe yourself. You're the first individual from the University of Florida to earn a place here in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You're followed by some guy named Emmitt Smith. I love hearing your story about how you got drafted, because it's a far cry from how we watch the draft today on NFL Network and ESPN, and we see the behind the scenes, and we watch players on camera as they're surrounded by family. Not quite exactly what happened back in 1971, was it?
No, it's not on the same planet. it was yeah, I mean, I tell the story, and people look at me like, something's wrong with you. I mean, that can't be true. And I'm going, yeah. I mean, you got to remember there wasn't the hype, there wasn't the media coverage. I mean, we follow kids now from the beginning of college football season that year for the seniors, juniors, and seniors, and you follow them, on these draft boards, and it's just absolutely amazing. I had no clue, none whatsoever, that I was going to be. I was told that I was probably going to get a chance, an opportunity. They probably would draft me in there were 17 rounds back in 1971, and I was probably going to be in the middle six. And I went, oh, okay. So that's that doesn't get me all excited, but and I think I better prepare, for the inevitable. And go get a job. So I had already interviewed and taken a job, committed to a job in Atlanta at a bank in Atlanta. I was going to go sit on the floor and do loans or something. I'm not sure what, but and so then we come to draft day, and Jack Harrison there at the Gainesville Sun, he comes over, and he and Norm Carlson, they say, we want you to go over to the newspaper, to the office, and watch it come off the teletype, watch the draft come off the teletype. And so I said, well, this is going to be a long day for me then, because, that's going to be the 2 days later that I'm going to come across it. So I go in and I agree to go and do it with him. And I watched Jim Plunkett come off, and Pastorini, and John Brockington, and several more of those in the first round there. And about that time, a couple hours into this thing, the phone rings in the news office there, and they said, Jack, it's the Los Angeles Rams calling for you. And they said it was the coach of the Los Angeles Rams. And I said, and they were taking pictures of all this, and I've got the receiver in my hand, and I'm going, who's the coach of the Los Angeles Rams? I had no idea who was the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams at that point in time. I barely knew that the Los Angeles Rams were part of the National Football League, because we didn't follow them on the East Coast. We followed Atlanta and Washington and Miami. So for the call to come through, my first thought was, somebody over the dorm is messing with me. They knew the boys all knew what I was doing, and I said, they're screwing with me here. I'm all right. And I pick up the phone, and sure enough, it was Tommy Profero. And Tommy goes, Jack, this is Tommy Profero, Los Angeles Rams. We're gonna draft you. And I thought for a moment ago, the only thing I could think of saying is thank you.
Well, you probably weren't saying thank you when you arrived at camp, because you had the daunting task of playing on the defensive end. You're probably thinking maybe it'd be better to be back in Atlanta in the banking industry rather than trying to compete for a job against Deacon Jones and Merlin Olsen, the famous fearsome foursome. How daunting was that to come as a rookie, cross country, find yourself in LA, and suddenly you're teammates with two of the greatest players of all time?
Yeah, Pete, I mean, honestly, I had thought that this is going to be a short trip. I mean, I was wondering why they didn't give me a round trip ticket, but because I thought this was, how in the world do you, when you finally understand who your teammates are going to be, you realize this is probably the best defensive line that's ever played the game. Now I'm supposed to try and make that football team. I mean, how do I compete against Deacon Jones? And I mean, it was there again. This is part of the whole theme across the book, that God had His inevitable hand
You're listening to a special edition of For Pete's Sake, my weekly blog on ProFootballHof.com. We're talking with Jack Youngblood from the class of 2001. He has a new book out called Because It Was Sunday, The Legend of Jack Youngblood, written by D.W. Cooper. It is a great read about one of the NFL's all-time great legends. And as we've been talking about a couple times today, Jack, is so much is put on one story about your career, about you playing through the playoffs and through a Super Bowl with a broken leg. Before we talk about that, and I owe you another $1 every time someone asks you about that, you always told me if you could be a rich man if you got paid $1 every time you got asked about it. So, but you know, it's an incredible story. But before we get to that, for those listening to today's blog, don't know everything about Jack Youngblood. He was the first-round draft pick of the Rams back in 1971. He is the first member from the University of Florida to earn a bronze bust in the Pro Football Hall of Fame here in Canton. And I think the one stat that stands out, there's lots of them. There's things like all NFC 7 times, all Pro 5 times, played in 7 straight Pro Bowls. But I think the one stat for a defensive end, and this is in the era before specialization, but Jack Youngblood played in 201 consecutive regular season games. That is still a Rams all-time record. But Jack, let's go back now to the story about the broken leg, the 1979 playoffs. You're in the first round of the playoffs when you break your leg. And you continue through that game, or you play in the championship. You also play in Super Bowl 14. Tell us a little bit about what the injury felt like, first of all, and then how you managed to do it.
First of all, the thing snapped in the left fibula. I got my foot caught on that turf, and I was pinned up against the body on the ground, and got picked up and got blocked from the inside. So it kind of leveraged my leg there. Snapped just like a pencil. I heard it snap, and excruciating pain. I go down. I'm rolling around on the carpet like a turtle on his back, and I get up, and we go to the locker room and take a picture of it, take an X-ray, and come back. And Doc says you got a broken leg, Jack. And I said, heck, I told you that on the way in. I mean, tell me something I don't know. I said, well, let's take this thing up and see what we can do with it. And he said, no, I can't do that. I said, yeah, you can. I'm gonna go see if we can play. I mean, we can't break it anymore. And I've got an obligation to my football team to go and try. That's my responsibility. I'm the captain of the football team, and I'm going to try. I've been here. I may not get another opportunity in the playoffs ever again, because you don't know year to year, what kind of opportunities you're going to have. And they said, and he looked at me and says, "You're nuts." I went, "Yeah, but that's the job that you inherit. I mean, that's part of the deal. You got to go and try and participate to the best of your ability to try and win the ball game for your teammates."
Your career was a legendary one for sure. You retired after the 1984 season, and the call finally came. Many say long overdue, but the call from Canton came one day after your 51st birthday. You were elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a member of the class of 2001. Describe what that felt like.
Having been on that final list and having your emotions played with, and the crescendos and the peaks and the valleys of that experience had kind of worn on me a little bit, and I was wondering, is this ever going to happen?
Joe being our Vice President of Communications, who handles the selection process, runs the press conference from the Super Bowl site each year. So I'll let you continue from there, Jack.
My buddy and good friend, and he says, I want you available for the press conference afterwards. So, and I've told him, I said, all right, now you better get I hope your room isn't too high because I may jump out the window if I don't make it this time. And Joe goes, no, don't do that. I mean, we'll and sure enough, the phone rang and we were watching it on television, and it took a moment or two to sink in, to really sink in, and of course it's been a whirlwind experience ever since for the last 10 years. 10 years, Jack, can you believe it's 10 years?
Time flies, that's for sure.
It really does.
Yes, it does.
It really does, and it truly has been an experience for 10 years. When you think of the brevity of the National Football League and of all the players that have come through the ranks, to be acknowledged as one of today's class, one of 267 that have ever put on a chin strap in this business. From my perspective, is phenomenal for me. It really is.
I'll even make that perspective even greater by pointing out of the 267 Hall of Famers, if you take away the contributors and the coaches, you're talking 235 players. Jack Youngblood, one of the all-time greats. He's been my guest here today on a special edition of For Pete's Sake blog. You can read it on ProFootballHof.com each Thursday. And it's been a real pleasure today, Jack, to talk not only some football stories, but talk about your book. And for those listening today, it's definitely a great read. If you want to know about one of the greatest defensive ends ever to play this game, find out more about just his NFL career, about what made him the man he is today, you can read it. It's called Because It Was Sunday, The Legend of Jack Youngblood. If you're visiting the Pro Football Hall of Fame and checking out Jack's bronze bust in our Hall of Fame gallery, you can find the book in our store, but it's also online on the Pro Football Hall of Fame's website, ProFootballHof.com. Drop by the online store and you can pick up your copy of Because It Was Sunday, The Legend of Jack Youngblood. Jack, thanks so much for your time today.